Redmond, you currently owe more than $10,000 in child support for the defendant's 2 teenage daughters, LaQuandria Redmond and Kiesha Redmond, who you say are not yours. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Marshall Redmond stood in court facing $16,198 in unpaid child support, convinced the 2 teenage girls he'd been ordered to support weren't biologically his. His ex-wife, Melissa Patterson, glared from the defendant's table, equally certain that LaQuandria and Kiesha Redmond were his daughters. The bitter divorce had left scars, Marshall claiming Melissa's infidelity, Melissa accusing Marshall of abandonment.
I've been taking care of these kids, and Your Honor, I've been going to jail, and I know for a fact that these kids aren't mine.
You say you know for a fact you've gone to jail?
Yes, ma'am, Your Honor. I've gone to jail because I owe more than $10,000.
What is that, sir?
This is some from the courts where I owe over $10,000 in child support paper.
Let me see that paperwork, Drew.
Marshall presented his case like a detective unveiling evidence. Grainy photos of Melissa allegedly with other men, a secret tape recording of bedroom noises, even a claim he'd caught her with a co-worker during her housekeeping job. Each accusation landed like a grenade, met with Melissa's vehement denials. The judge's eyebrows rose as Marshall described installing a recorder in their bedroom vent, convinced he'd capture proof of her affairs.
This is a picture of me coming home from work, Your Honor. This was when we was married. Your Honor, I rode a bicycle in the cold to go to work. Your Honor, when I got home, it was a tall, dark-skinned man walking out of my apartment.
That is not true, Your Honor.
Miss Patterson, do you know anyone that looks like that?
No, Your Honor, I really don't. In his mind, I was with everybody.
The heart of Marshall's doubt centered on 2 pivotal moments: a trip to Melissa's hometown, where he claimed to see her sitting on another man's lap, and a period during their marriage when he refused to share a bed with her. To him, these incidents created impossible windows for paternity. Melissa countered that Marshall's absence had nothing to do with distrust. He simply preferred the streets to fatherhood.
So you said you had one more piece of evidence as to why you believe LaQuandria is not your daughter?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, tell the court.
When we was in her hometown, I creeped up on her at her family's house. When I got there, Your Honor, I went round the back where they usually be, and I observed Miss Patterson drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, sitting on another man's lap.
The situation became even more complicated when Judge Lake asked about the second pregnancy. Despite the growing tension and distance between them, Ms. Patterson and Mr. Redmond had conceived again. But Mr. Redmond, in his anger and frustration, believed that Kiesha could not be his. He claimed that during the pregnancy, they had been sleeping in separate beds, his distrust growing every day. Ms. Patterson, however, vehemently denied this, claiming that Mr. Redmond's issues were all in his mind.
So why do you feel Kiesha is not your child? That's what I want to understand.
Because, Your Honor, I was so furious with Miss Patterson. When we left her hometown, I slept on the couch. I wouldn't even sleep in the bed with her.
So you were not sleeping together?
We were.
That's why you feel like you're not
Yes,
Kiesha's biological
That's not
father.
true, Your Honor.
When LaQuandria and Kiesha entered the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted. These weren't abstract child support payments anymore. These were young women with raw emotions about the father who drifted in and out of their lives. LaQuandria's voice cracked as she described being homeless and calling Marshall for help, only to be ignored. Kiesha, Marshall's apparent twin in features, wiped tears, recalling how she'd taken a second job to help pay rent while her father remained absent.
What kind of relationship have you had with Mr. Redmond?
Nothing at all.
Really?
Yes.
And you've been told this is your father?
Yes, I have been told that he was my father. But this is my father right here because she has been here my whole entire life.
The girl's testimony painted a damning portrait. Birthday parties thrown by Marshall's father, but not Marshall himself. Sporadic child support payments, and most painfully, the growing realization that the man they'd called dad wanted no part of that title. Marshall's rebuttal fell flat, especially when he couldn't even look his weeping daughters in the eye. His claim that Melissa had kidnapped them from his care earned scornful laughter from LaQuandria.
We had nothing. We called him and he never gave us nothing when we asked for money or anything, nothing.
And this is a man you've grown up believing is your father?
Yeah, I really love him. I really do, like that's my twin. But now, as I grew up, I started to know that he ain't nothing. Nothing. His mom is too old to be raising a 40-year-old man.
Marshall's claim that Melissa had kidnapped the girls was met with fierce anger from LaQuandria. She fired back that he had left them to fend for themselves. She reminded Marshall that he had been present at their births, had held them as babies, and had only started denying paternity when the state demanded money. The judge's sharp questions exposed the holes in his story. If he truly doubted they were his, why had he waited nearly 2 decades to contest it?
First of all, Your Honor, the kids were kidnapped from me when they were in my custody. She came back and stole the kids from me. She kept them away from me so that I would not be able to have a relationship with these kids. Then I found out when
Why is you sitting here lying? My mama ain't never had kidnapped us. She the one that signed them birth certificates. You ain't signed nothing.
The judge observed the family's dynamic with growing concern. The girl's pain was evident, LaQuandria's hardened expression, Kieshia's quiet tears, while Marshall remained emotionally detached. His focus on proving Melissa's infidelity overshadowed any acknowledgement of the daughters caught in the crossfire.
Your Honor,
You didn't even look over there. You didn't even look her way. How is it you can't even look this young woman in the eye? I mean, this is a young girl that could potentially be your biological child, and you're not even looking at her. When she's speaking, when she's expressing the deepest part of herself and her emotions and how she feels. What is going on with you?
But there was one undeniable fact. Despite all his doubts, Redmond had stayed. Long enough for another pregnancy. The court wanted answers. Why had he remained in the marriage if he truly believed she was unfaithful? Redmond had no real answer. Maybe deep down, even he wasn't sure what was true anymore. But one thing was certain. Only a DNA test could settle the matter once and for all.
It comes to Kiesha Redmond. Mr. Redmond, you are the father. When it comes to LaQuandria Redmond, Mr. Redmond, you are the father.
Now you need to come over here and you need to apologize to these kids.
He don't need him.
Ms. Salvo, you claim that around the time you conceived you carried on a sexual relationship with the defendant, Mr. Gonzalez. You desperately want to prove Mr. Gonzalez is her biological father.
Ashleigh Salvo walked into court clutching photos of her 1-year-old daughter Amaya, determined to prove Julio Gonzalez was the father despite his vehement denials. Ashleigh insisted they'd only slept together once while intoxicated, while Julio claimed a months-long affair involving at least 6 unprotected encounters during his engagement. What was at stake was more than child support. It was a little girl's chance to know her biological roots.
I can't stand him. He knows Amaya's his daughter, but he refuses to take care of him. I've never, ever had sex with any Hispanic man but him. I prefer black people. I don't like Hispanic men. I was intoxicated at the time. I was drunk, he came over, he got me at the right time.
Julio's testimony vividly depicted their relationship's origins, meeting through their mothers, drinking together, and watching movies that inevitably led to the bedroom. His shocking revelation about being caught naked in Ashleigh's kitchen by her mother drew gasps, as did his admission that he'd lied to his fiancée about getting braids when visiting Ashleigh for sex.
I went to get something to drink. When I opened the fridge, I was naked. Her mom saw. Her mom didn't get mad at me or nothing.
Wow, okay.
Yet Ashleigh dismissed his entire account, scoffing that their lone sexual encounter wasn't even good. She admitted having a boyfriend during the same period, a black man she initially believed could be the father until Amaya's Hispanic features emerged. She'd even administered a DNA test that excluded him. But Julio remained unconvinced.
The whole part 6 times, that's ridiculous. It wasn't even good, so why would I keep going?
So, Mr. Gonzalez, one time,
Yes,
the sex was protected or not?
it wasn't.
It is your contention that that sexual encounter.
Ashleigh admitted that, for a while, she had believed her boyfriend was the father. He even helped her financially during the pregnancy. But when Amaya was born, doubt crept in. Her boyfriend was black, and Amaya didn't look like his other children. She looked Hispanic, too much like Julio, Ashleigh claimed. The dimple on her cheek and the shape of her nose all pointed to him. She even brought a picture to prove it. Holding it up, she declared that the resemblance was undeniable.
You excluded your ex-boyfriend?
Yes.
It's because Amaya looked Hispanic and not black?
Too much of him. She looks way too much. The dimple, she had the shape of his eyebrows.
Looks could be deceiving, the judge reminded her, and Julio had more than suspicions. He had proof that Ashleigh had been with someone else, his best friend. Julio recalled the moment vividly. 5 days after introducing his friend to Ashleigh, they were sitting in a car together when his friend turned to him with an apology. Then, he pulled out his phone. What Julio saw next sent his world spinning. Naked pictures of Ashleigh, proof, he said, that she had been with yet another man.
Excluded as a possibility.
Yes.
So now that you know her ex has been tested, are some of your doubts?
Yes, my doubts is I took my best friend over there to her house. 5 days later, I get in the car with my best friend. He's Hispanic, Puerto Rican.
Ashleigh's denial was swift and sharp. She had never sent those photos, never taken them, never posed for them. Julio's best friend was lying, she claimed. Desperation tinged her voice as she dismissed the accusation entirely. But Julio didn't waver. His friend had shown him the pictures and confessed that he and Ashleigh had been intimate. With every passing second, Julio's trust in her crumbled further. How many more secrets was she hiding?
Time.
No.
Besides your ex-boyfriend and Mr. Gonzalez.
Who his supposed to be best friend is, because he didn't even talk to nobody.
So, as you think back, no one else?
No.
The judge pressed Ashleigh about that fateful evening at the mall, the night she met up with her ex-boyfriend. She admitted to being with him, intimately, but insisted that, at the time, she was still in a committed relationship with Julio. Then came the past, her own admission that, as a teenager, she had been young and dumb, making choices she regretted.
I guess what you would call it fast and under. Yeah, I was young and dumb. I was a kid. I did everything with whoever. At that time, I conceived my daughter.
Ashleigh's fiancé, Talisha Millender, provided emotional testimony about stepping into the father role and purchasing diapers and formula, while Julio allegedly contributed little beyond 2 toothbrushes. Yet Julio countered that his deceased mother had bought Amaya a crib and essentials, portraying himself as a willing but distrusted participant in his possible daughter's life. The conflicting stories left Judge Lake sorting through contradictory financial support and involvement accounts.
He bought 2 itty-bitty toothbrushes and some toothpaste. That's it.
So all these things he named off, you've never mother
crib
did.
that he got her, I think they found it on the corner of the road. I don't think
The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Julio, torn between hope and betrayal, clung to the last shred of doubt, which kept him from accepting Amaya as his own. He needed answers, cold, hard, undeniable proof. And as the judge called for the DNA results, the room fell silent. Every accusation, every denial, every desperate plea had led to this moment. A single sheet of paper held the truth.
Mr. Gonzalez, it has been determined by you, not the father.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Can I still come around and see Amaya and help her out if I can? Because for 5 months, she's been my daughter and she's still gonna be my daughter.
Ms. Rochelle, you are desperate to determine the biological father of your 4-year-old daughter, Jasmine. You confess that one man signed your daughter's birth certificate, yet another man is paying child support. Now, Mr. Harris, you're the potential father who is paying support for a child you believe is not yours.
Yes, Your Honor.
They didn't just drag Mr. Harris into this courtroom over a simple paternity question. No, this case came with chaos, confusion, and cold-hearted consequences. Imagine this: one man's name on the birth certificate, another man slapped with child support bills, and a 4-year-old girl caught in the middle. But the real issue? Mr. Harris spent 2 long, miserable months behind bars, jailed for a child he swears isn't his. And trust me, the tangled mess only gets worse.
I was living across the street from him, and I seen him standing out there, and I was like, "Ooh, he is fine."
Okay, so you guys met,
Mm-hmm.
and at some point you started a sexual relationship.
Yes, Your Honor.
It all started across the street. Ms. Ritchie spotted Mr. Harris and thought he looked fine. What began as neighborly glances turned into steamy nights and casual hookups. But while she believed they were building something real, Harris made it clear this wasn't love. This was just a fling. That should have been the end of it. But fate had other plans when Ms. Ritchie learned she was pregnant and didn't even bother to tell Harris.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I was over at a friend's house, and I was feeling nauseated. And so she kept saying, "You're pregnant, you're pregnant." I was like, "No, I'm not. Don't do that to me." And so therefore, I went over to the house and I took a pregnancy test and it turned out positive.
Instead of rushing to Harris with the news, she reached out to another man. That man stood by her side, showed up at the hospital, and even signed the birth certificate. To everyone around, he was the baby's father. But behind the scenes, Ritchell was doubtful. She knew there was a chance the birth father wasn't the man she had on paper, but the man across the street. And while she hoped the man who signed was the father, the truth wasn't so simple.
I was actually hoping that the other guy was, because I know that Mr. Harris was not going to be there.
That is not true, and I am not the only guy who should be tested anyway, because if you remember, I lived across the street from you, but you also had...
Mr. Harris's life turned upside down when, despite not being listed as the father, the state ordered him to pay child support. How? A missed DNA appointment, twice. He couldn't make it to the first test, then missed the second, and by default, the court declared him the father. No proof, no confirmation, just paperwork, and a hefty bill. That bill eventually landed him in handcuffs, sitting in a cold jail cell for over 2 months, accused of abandoning a child he didn't even believe was his.
How you ended up paying child support for a child when you're not listed as the father, but you paying child support. How did that happen?
I really don't know.
You missed your appointment for your DNA test.
Yeah, that's how it happened. I missed my DNA appointment. I rescheduled it because I didn't have a way to get there.
While Harris was in jail, word started to spread. Friends told him that Ritchell wasn't exactly homebound and was out living it up, leaving her daughter behind with anyone willing to babysit. Even worse, whispers reached him that he might not be the father at all. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about pride, betrayal, and the years he'd lost because of this accusation. He wanted justice.
You get hauled off to jail at some point?
Yes.
What happened?
They came to the house. At first, I thought I was arrested because of traffic tickets, because that's what the police told me. But once I got to the jail, they actually pulled up my record and said that I owe like $6,000 back in child support. So I guess I owe for over a couple of years or so, I guess.
But Ritchell wasn't backing down. She insisted there were only 2 possible fathers, the man who signed the birth certificate and Harris, no one else. No wild nights with strangers, no secret flings, just 2 men, 1 child, and 1 brutal mystery. Yet Mr. Harris's wife, who stood by him through this ordeal, wasn't so sure. She claimed Ritchell had admitted to a 3rd man, another possible father, throwing even more gasoline on the fire.
For one, there was not a lot of people going in and out of my house.
But you did admit that there was one other guy, because that's the person that you let accompany you through the pregnancy.
It was the other guy and him. That's it. There's no one else.
Your Honor, when I first met, when she first started contacting me on his phone, it was on Father's Day last year, June 15th. That's the day after he went to jail. She kept on writing, Happy Father's Day, love, Jasmine.
Tensions flared when Harris's wife revealed something chilling. She'd never even heard of Ritchell or Jasmine until Father's Day, the day after Harris was locked up. That's when the messages started. Happy Father's Day, love, Jasmine, she received repeatedly. A child she'd never met, from a woman she'd never heard of, suddenly appeared like a ghost from her boyfriend's past. It shook her to the core. Was this child really his, or was she being dragged into a mess that wasn't theirs?
Are there any other possibilities? Any other men?
No, there's
She
not.
said there was one, Your Honor.
She told you there was one other?
When we started talking last year, when he was in jail, she never told me who, but she said one other guy besides my husband.
So where's the 3rd guy?
There is only 2.
Did you tell her 3?
No, I did not.
Yes, Your Honor.
So this conversation didn't happen?
No, it didn't.
Throughout the hearing, emotions bounced like a tennis ball. Ritchell claimed she wanted Harris to step up and be Jasmine's father. Harris argued there was no way to be a father to a child he didn't know, hadn't bonded with, and possibly didn't even share blood with. And then came the elephant in the room. The man who signed the birth certificate, the one who stood by Ritchell during her pregnancy, was still paying child support too.
But see, the thing is that I want him to take care of his daughter.
Your Honor.
That's all I want, is for him to take care of his daughter.
How can you take care of a child that you're not even bonded with when you have the child and a guy there to take care of your child and who loves your child as his own?
2 men, 2 financial obligations, and 1 innocent child trapped in this legal circus. Harris had spent months in jail, his reputation wrecked, and his relationship on the rocks. Racheal had endured judgment, doubt, and the weight of single motherhood. But behind the money, the paperwork, and the accusations, the real question remained unanswered. Who was Jasmine's biological father? The judge prepared to read the DNA results.
Mr. Harris, you are the father.
I don't want to deal with her for 14 more years. She harasses us on the phone. She calls us all the time.
Ms. Brown Ramirez, you are here in court today because you say you're hoping to save your 10-year relationship with the defendant, Mr. Wayne.
Yes, Your Honor.
You state you have 3 children with him, but confess that your 9-month-old daughter may not be his biological child.
Yes, Your Honor.
They didn't just argue like a regular couple. No, this was war every day and night for 10 straight years. But today, they weren't fighting in their living room. They were fighting in front of the world, in court, because Ms. Brown Ramirez dropped a bombshell. After a decade of love, lies, and betrayal, she admitted something explosive. The man she'd built her family with might not be the father of her 9-month-old daughter.
It's a constant battle of whether or not I'm cheating, I'm lying, and I'm here because, you know, we have 3 kids, and I'm woman enough to be here and say that there's a possibility that my 9-month-old daughter is not Mr. Wayne. I did lie to Mr. Wayne, but he's always saying
lying
that
about
I'm
everything.
cheating,
You lied about
I'm lying.
who you was.
Okay,
about
but
how many people
I
lied about who she
honest
was?
about that, Your Honor.
Yeah.
It wasn't just one mistake that tore them apart. Ms. Brown Ramirez confessed she'd lied to him over and over, starting from day 1. She hadn't told him the truth about her past, her partners, and who she really was. And Mr. Wayne wasn't shy to remind everyone. He felt like he'd been living with a stranger for 10 years. He accused her of lying, cheating, and manipulating him at every turn. And the worst part? He stayed anyway, chasing a dream of a family he never had.
Did you think she was cheating on you throughout your relationship?
Yes.
Every day, it was
That's right.
constantly, you're a liar, you're a cheater. Every name in the book you can think of, I was it.
So this has been a decade-long on and off relationship. Why'd you say? Why do you continue to come back?
Exactly.
The whole reason me coming back to her while she was pregnant, my daughter, my first child, is a simple fact of me not ever having a dad.
For years, Mr. Wayne stood firm beside her. They had 3 children, a messy on and off relationship, but somehow he kept coming back. But now he was done playing house. He told the court without blinking, if this baby wasn't his, he'd walk away and never look back. No more back and forth. No more for the kids. His patience had worn thin, and the cracks in their relationship had finally split wide open.
Doubts about 2 children. I want to start with the 9-month-old first. Tell me exactly what happened as to why your 9-month-old is in question.
Well, Your Honor, we were separated in the month that I had conceived, and I was dealing with someone else. Being that I never had a father, I chose to go back to Mr. Wayne.
But the real twist came when Ms. Brown Ramirez admitted why there was even doubt about the baby's paternity. She had been with another man during a rocky period when they were separated, and it wasn't some meaningless encounter. It happened around the time she got pregnant. There was no protection, no plan, just one messy night that now threatened to blow up everything.
A one-time thing, or did
Nope.
you have a continuous
That one time I
relationship?
did not use protection.
And during the same time, you were intimate with Mr. Wayne.
Yes, Your Honor.
What point did you begin to realize that baby Eremiah may not be Mr. Wayne's
Doing
biological
her
child?
thing.
When I got pregnant with her, when I first conceived.
Still, she insisted she wasn't a villain. She said she returned because Mr. Wayne kept pulling her in, promising stability, a family, and the father figure she never had growing up. But in private, she said, that promise came with a price. Constant accusations, constant suspicion. She couldn't breathe without him questioning her loyalty. And now, with this child caught in the middle, everything was spiraling out of control.
You just say, I'm gonna walk away from a child that possibly is not mine. And you know, you've been there knowingly that she's probably not yours.
So, Mr. Wayne, how do you respond to that? Because truthfully, I understand your doubt, first off, but I feel almost as if you're at war. You know, a part of you says, I want to be the father I never had, and I keep going back to this woman.
Mr. Wayne wasn't innocent either. He admitted he wasn't perfect, but he painted himself as the man who stayed, who kept coming back despite the lies and doubt. He said he tried to be the father he never had, tried to make the family work, and was there for the birth because he didn't want his children growing up feeling unwanted or unloved, but even he couldn't ignore the voice in his head, whispering that this baby might not be his.
So Mr. Wayne, she's admitted that she's cheated. That's wrong. You've admitted you've cheated. That's wrong. You also say you want to create a family, you want to make things better, you want to have the family, the children to have the family you didn't. What I'm trying to understand is, if you want to do that, how can you do that and be verbally abusive to their mother?
The courtroom wasn't just tense, it was boiling. Ms. Brown Ramirez broke down as she explained that she always suspected the child might not be Mr. Wayne's. The moment she saw that positive pregnancy test, the doubt hit her like a punch to the gut, but she didn't tell him. She let him rub her belly, kiss her forehead, and plan a life for a child that might belong to someone else. Why? Because she was scared he'd leave, and now, here they were.
Brown Ramirez, in your heart of heart, do you believe your daughter is Mr. Wayne's
Yes, I do.
biological child?
Because honestly, I feel as if she looks identical to him and his siblings and his nieces and nephews. You know, they have very strong genes, and I see it in her every day that I look into her eyes. That is what I see.
The judge asked the question everyone was thinking. Why keep this secret? Ms. Brown Ramirez admitted she was afraid. She was scared of Mr. Wayne's reaction, afraid of being left alone and raising 3 children without him. But that fear had grown into a toxic cycle. He stayed, but never trusted her. She tried to move on, but the weight of the secret kept pulling her back down.
Were you intimate with the other man during that window of conception?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yep, because we were separated.
Okay.
We were separated and still
And
kicking.
how about Mr. Wayne?
Yes, Your Honor.
Were you intimate with him during those days, that week as well?
It was about a week after.
Everyone held their breath as the envelope came out, the DNA results that could shatter a family or glue it back together. Ms. Brown Ramirez wiped her tears. Mr. Wayne stared straight ahead, and the courtroom leaned forward. 10 years of chaos, betrayal, love, and heartbreak led to this moment. One piece of paper would decide if Mr. Wayne would stay or vanish forever.
Mr. Wayne, it has been determined by this court that you are her father.
Thank you.
Ms. Adams, you say you're here today regarding a matter of extreme urgency. Now, your son, Mr. Adams, is joining us via satellite from Flint, Michigan, because he's been prohibited by law enforcement from leaving your home state.
They weren't just fighting over paternity, they were fighting to keep a man out of jail. Today's courtroom wasn't just about a child. It was about freedom, debt, and years of bad blood. On one side stood a mother, desperate to clear her son's name before law enforcement threw him behind bars. On the other side, a woman who claimed that the same man had abandoned their child, forcing her to raise him alone. And between them, a 3-year-old boy and a mountain of uncertainty.
Your Honor, my son is now facing jail because of this situation.
This very moment, you're concerned that he could be arrested for failure to pay child support for a child that both of you...
Mr. Adams didn't even bother to show up in person. He couldn't because he was stuck in Flint, Michigan, barred from leaving the state. His mother, Miss Adams, was in court instead, terrified that any day now, police would come knocking with an arrest warrant. According to her, her son had been slapped with a crippling child support order for a child that wasn't even his. She claimed they were here to clear the air and possibly save his future.
I met her at a house party. She tried to have sex with me on the first date, so that was a judge of character right there.
But you weren't in a committed relationship.
No, Your Honor.
So, Ms. Williams, when you met Mr. Adams, did you intend this to be a committed relationship?
The tension didn't stop there. As the judge dug deeper, both sides admitted this wasn't some deep, committed relationship gone wrong. Mr. Adams outright denied they'd ever been a couple. He said they met at a house party, hooked up and went their separate ways. Nothing serious, nothing lasting. Miss Williams admitted the same, said it was an on and off fling and that she had been seeing other men around the same time without protection. Suddenly, the doubt in Mr. Adams's camp wasn't just speculation, it was backed by her words.
I mean, no, when we was young at time, we hooked up on and off, and it just...
So it was just an on and off thing?
Yeah, it was just an on and off thing.
So if it wasn't committed, during that time, were you also sleeping with other men as well?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Without using protection?
Yes.
All right, so the doubts that...
Still, Miss Williams argued she'd never forced the issue. She said she didn't consider Mr. Adams a possible father until her relationship with her ex-boyfriend imploded. For an entire year, she'd assumed her ex was the dad. Only after a paternity test ruled him out did she get back to Mr. Adams and break the news that he might be the one. But by then, things had spiraled far beyond a simple conversation.
I asked him twice to get the DNA test. He said, I'm hungover. over. He was giving me excuses, basically. So I took it upon myself to get help with the DNA test. It wasn't for no money at all. I said, I pay for the DNA test myself. You ain't got to come out of pocket. That part is not my fault.
Miss Williams argued that Mr. Adams was facing legal trouble because he dodged responsibility for years. She insisted he was the father of her son and claimed she hadn't asked for a dime, until she was forced to by the state when things got hard. And now she was done entertaining his excuses. She wanted the court to make it official.
So you went to the state, and then during that time, you had to name who the potential father could be.
Yes, I did.
And you gave the state his name.
Yes, I did.
And then he was ordered to go to court.
Yes, he was.
Mr. Adams, did you go to court?
No, Your Honor, only due to the fact that I was incarcerated, so I didn't receive any.
Miss Adams wasn't letting it slide. She recalled overhearing Miss Williams telling her daughter that Mr. Adams wasn't the father. Not once, but multiple times. Once in her living room, once in a department store when Miss Williams was heavily pregnant. Miss Williams denied these claims, calling them lies cooked up to escape child support.
She came about in my very own living room while I was in the kitchen. And she and my daughter was talking, and the question came up again, was my son the father of the child? And she said no.
That's
actually.
a lie.
So you heard her say no?
Yes. She said no in my living room.
But that wasn't the only accusation. Miss Adams went further, suggesting that Miss Williams was living recklessly, leaving her son with anyone willing to babysit while she danced at strip clubs, vanishing for days without checking in. Miss Williams fired back, saying the narrative was twisted. She admitted she'd worked as a dancer, but insisted her mother had always watched her child. She claimed she was doing everything she could to turn her life around. Now working at a hospital in Houston, trying to give her son a stable life. She wasn't here to ruin anyone's life, she said. She was here because she wanted clarity for her child's sake.
She letting everybody babysit while she go to the strip club ain't doing her no good. Because I babysitted the child and she didn't come get me for 2 days.
But the truth was, this wasn't just about whether or not Mr. Adams was the biological father. It was about two clashing worlds. One side fighting to avoid the weight of a child support debt, the other demanding recognition for a child she claimed had been neglected and ignored. And beneath it all, both parties carried deep resentment, slinging personal attacks and dragging each other's lifestyles through the mud.
If he just would have got up and got the DNA test when I asked him, we wouldn't even be going through this.
If she would have known who the father of her child was from jump, having all that sex
I
with
made
all
a
them
mistake.
guys
Yes, I
unprotected,
did. And I'm going to own up to it. Yes, I did.
You wouldn't be.
Finally, it all came down to the DNA results. Everything, Mr. Adams's freedom, Miss Williams' vindication, and a child's future, balanced on a single sheet of paper. For 3 years, they'd gone back and forth, one side claiming doubt, the other demanding accountability. They'd dragged their personal lives into the spotlight, accusing, denying, and defending themselves at every turn. But now, none of that mattered. The science was about to settle it once and for all.
It has been determined that Mr. Adams is not the father.
Take me off child support, baby.
Ms. Lapine, you say for the past 30 years, you'd always believed the defendant, Mr. Lapine, was your dad.
Yes, Your Honor.
Then just months ago at a family dinner, you were told by a family member that he's not your biological father.
Yes, Your Honor.
For 30 years, Brandy Lapine lived with one unshakable truth. Richard Lapine was her father. It wasn't a question, it was her reality. Until one casual family dinner cracked that truth wide open. A relative casually threw a grenade across the dinner table, a cruel suggestion that Richard might not be her biological dad, a comment meant as gossip, but it shook Brandy's entire identity. That night, everything she thought she knew about herself collapsed.
We was at a family dinner and we was all just discussing how our parents was, and then family members started saying that, well, you don't know if he's your dad or not because you don't look like your dad and he might not be your dad.
Wait a minute, wait. Did you ever heard of anything like this?
No, Your Honor.
She tried to shake it off, but the words followed her home like shadows. The next day, unable to silence the doubt, Brandy picked up the phone and called the man she'd called Dad all her life. Richard's reaction wasn't what she expected. Instead of firm reassurance, he hesitated. He didn't deny it outright. He confessed that back then, around the time of her conception, there was another man around. And suddenly, the question wasn't just family gossip, it was real.
I've been 4 to 5
5 years in jail, it gets rough.
4 to 5 years in jail.
Yes, ma'am.
For unpaid child support.
Yes, ma'am.
For a young woman that calls you and then says, some family member told me you may not even be my biological father.
Richard Lapine wasn't just any man facing this paternity doubt. His entire adult life had been chained to Brandy's name. He'd spent 4 to 5 years locked in jail for unpaid child support for a daughter he wasn't even sure belonged to him. And now, standing in court, he faced yet another hearing the very next day. If today's DNA test confirmed he was the father, he'd likely be hauled back to jail again for a child he might never have fathered.
You could be thrown back in jail again for being behind, and yet you still don't know whether you're her biological father.
True, I don't know if I'm her dad or not.
Have you ever been arrested for anything else besides this child support issue?
Never, ma'am.
Just getting behind in child support.
Yes, ma'am, that's it.
But it got worse. After he and Brandy's mother separated, Richard learned from friends that she hadn't exactly been loyal. People close to him claimed they had been intimate with her around the same time. For decades, he ignored those rumors, believing what was written on the birth certificate, that Brandy was his. He married her mother, he signed the papers, he stepped up. But now, in that courtroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been duped.
So after you learned her mother was pregnant, you went on and married and signed the birth certificate and you stepped up to be the father.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you remember her mother being intimate with anybody else during that time?
I didn't know then. After me and her separated, I was told by friends of mine that they had slept with her.
The case wasn't just between Brandy and Richard. It was tearing their entire family apart. You could hear the murmurs when Richard's other daughter, Jennifer, entered the courtroom. Jennifer looked exactly like her father. The same dark hair, complexion, and build. But Brandy? The resemblance wasn't there. Jennifer admitted that even as kids, people joked Brandy was the milkman's baby. It seemed like harmless teasing back then. But now, with everything crumbling, the jokes didn't feel funny anymore.
Mr. Lapine is your father?
Yes.
And you grew up believing Brandy was your sister?
Yes.
So when did you hear about there being any doubt?
I mean, we were always teased about it, but...
Who would tease you?
It's just different family members. So
what would they say?
It was just things like, oh, well, you're the milkman's baby, you know, stuff like that.
Brandy tried to hold herself together as she looked at a photo of the three of them, herself, Jennifer, and Richard. It was clear, even to her, that she didn't fit the picture. But still, she clung to something deeper. She believed she shared her father's personality and his attitude. And honestly, what child wants to believe their entire life has been a lie? This wasn't just about genetics. It was about who she was and the only man she'd ever known as dad.
And you feel like you strongly resemble your father,
right?
But Brandy does not.
Right.
When you look at this picture, Brandy, what do you feel?
I always thought that I just got my mother's side of the genes. I always thought, you know, I look like my mom, but I always thought I had my dad's attitude.
The court records painted a brutal picture. Richard hadn't just paid child support, he'd lost years of his freedom because of it. Every unpaid dollar meant another trip to jail. Documents dating to 1998 showed payment after payment, paycheck garnishments, and court dates. And the missing years? Those were the times he sat behind bars, locked away for falling behind on payments. Now, with a court date looming tomorrow, he was staring down the possibility of another sentence, if today's test confirmed he was her father.
Court date tomorrow, the stakes, they really can't be any higher because they could send you back to jail.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a vicious cycle at some point. If you lose your job or you get behind in your support, then you go to jail. Well, even if you had a job, when you go to jail, you lose the job.
Yes, ma'am.
And yet, after everything, the missed years, the court battles, the questions, Richard said he never got arrested for anything else. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't out there causing chaos. He was just a man crushed under the weight of a child support order that may have been based on a lie. All he wanted now was the truth. For better or worse, he needed to know if the child he'd suffered for was really his own, and his wife backed him up.
And I'm sorry. I wish I'd never left. I wasn't worried about what their mom had to say. And then I wouldn't have messed Miss Hopper. And she's been there with me through the thick and thin.
Please stand up, ma'am. State your name.
Linda Opfer. It's been hard because every time Richard goes to jail, and not only do Brandy and Jennifer lose their father again, but also my 4 children.
The courtroom fell into a heavy silence As the judge prepared to read the results, Jennifer sat stiff, holding her breath. Richard stared ahead, face frozen. Brandy was almost shaking. 30 years of uncertainty, years of jail time, another possible jail time, a family torn in half. Everything hung in the balance. The judge opened the envelope.
In the case of Lapine versus Lapine, when it comes to Jennifer Lapine, Mr. Richard Lapine, you are her father. The next result pertains to Brandy. Mr. Richard Lapine is not your biological father.